I'm going to start with a question for Lily, because I know, Lily, that that people have asked you if your book is autobiographical, and I wonder what your feelings are about autobiography in fiction.
Right. I feel very often that the reader, I mean, I think people have not accused me, but have tried to make connections between, I am a widow. My husband died a few years ago, and so readers, I think, have tried to make the connection between me and Nina. But again, I think that very often readers too often try and make a connection between the writer and her work. And in this book, I really tried incredibly hard to make everybody as different from me and my husband, my late husband, as I could. And as an example, Philip, the main character, is a mathematician. My husband was a lawyer. Philip is over 6 feet tall, dark, and very thin. My husband wasn't short, but he was quite stocky and blonde. Philip was born in Wisconsin. My husband was born in Brussels. So, I mean, I could go on and on, just showing the differences. And I've told this story before, but recently I read a very good article in the Atlantic Monthly by Brett Anthony Johnson, who's the director of creative writing at Harvard. And he wrote this piece called, in which he tells the students to write what they don't know. And I agree with him. And then he tells this very nice story on himself about how he was at a reading like this, and a woman raised her hand and said how much she liked his work. And then she also said, after reading all his stories, she thought he would be taller. So, I mean, I think that sort of is a good example of how readers too often react to people. I mean, in terms of autobiography, I mean, I wrote, my previous novel was set in Paraguay, and I've never been to Paraguay.
But what about the math in the book? Why was he a mathematician, and what is your interest in math?
I mean, the main reason was that I wanted him to be as different as possible from my husband, Edward, who was the lawyer. But I also, in school, I was really quite good at math, and I've always liked math. I actually had higher SAT scores in high school than English scores, and had the world been a little bit different, I might have become a mathematician instead of writer. I mean, I'm always very interested in math, and I just got sort of fascinated by physics and quantum mechanics and all sorts of things, and I can't wait for tomorrow night to look at the second Nova episode and read Brian Greene and Stephen Hawking and all those people. I mean, I'm a complete amateur, and I don't understand the math at all, but I'm just fascinated by the theories and possible parallel universe and string theory and all of that. Yeah.
So that was a great pleasure to be able to.
And the probability was kind of like a gift, because I mean that sort of is a sort of a metaphor for the book as well. I mean, the probability of somebody dying suddenly, what is that probability? So that sort of fit in, kind of, as I said, sort of a gift. I hadn't planned that it would fit in as well as I think it does. Okay. Yes? Now I'm going to ask you a question. Yeah, I wanted to find out, because your story is so grounded in Texas, and I know you're not from Texas, and I want to know how you feel about writing about a place that is, I mean, I know you live there, but it's not your home, or it's foreign to you, basically.
Well, I see one native Texan here.
Fort Worth.
Fort Worth. So I'm really glad I didn't go into Fort Worth too much. I moved to Texas in 1978, and I started writing about it pretty soon after I got there. My second novel, The Shadow Line, is set in Houston, and I did a lot of checking that I wouldn't have done if I'd been writing about New York. I mean, for instance, I wanted, there's a certain smell in downtown Houston when the Maxwell House plant to the east of downtown is roasting coffee. So, you know, I was very fortunate, and there was a wonderful city historian, Stephen Fox, who helped me a great deal. And I think that in a way, writing about Texas made me alert in a way that I wasn't in writing about New York and things that I was much more familiar with, and that readers, even if they haven't been to New York, you can just kind of say the Upper West Side and people think they know something. And sometimes it's like, one of my favorite writers is Raymond Chandler, who had a wonderful way with street names and a wonderful way with Los Angeles, with the atmosphere and the air in Los Angeles and what it's like when it rains there. And I mean, I've barely been to Los Angeles, but I feel as if I know it. And part of what I've wanted to do, but have been also intimidated about doing, is to write about Texas. So I've written about Texas cities mostly, which is a less ordinary topic than the West and the country. And this story is very much grounded in my life. I lived for 11 years in a small town in Caldwell County. I lived in the county seat. And I came to know a man who had retired from being a county extension agent. And he taught me a lot about native wildflowers. He was not at all like DR, and his family life was very different. But my curiosity about the flowers gave him to me, and his house and his way of trying to preserve Texas wildflowers. So I guess I've just tried to become not a regional writer, but a truthful writer about a place that I found pretty fascinating in every way except politically. Do you have questions for us, for either of us?
Can you each talk a little bit about your writing routine and how you go about your writing process?
I pretty much write every day, all day, but I go to yoga first and then stay home. I'm being not totally honest, because after a book comes out, there's usually a time when I'm really not writing a lot. I'm just sort of worrying a lot. So I haven't been writing. I mean, I've done a piece for a magazine and stuff, but I haven't seriously started anything. So I give myself a couple of months of sort of, I don't know how to call it, just stating or something. But usually I'm pretty disciplined, and I don't really have anything else I have to do. I don't have another job or anything. I don't teach, and so I pretty much write all day. And my rule is I hardly ever have lunch with anybody unless somebody comes from way out of town, and it's the only possible time I can see that person. But so,
Yeah, lunch is the enemy of literature. It really breaks the day. I try to write in the morning, and I try to write at least 3 hours. I'm working on a short novel now. And so even if what I'm doing is just sitting in my writing room, that's working also. And when I don't write for a long time, I get quite grumpy and disagreeable. But at the same time, procrastination is something that I, as a writer at least, am very good at. And since I work at home, there's always something going wrong with the house, and there's laundry to be done and that kind of thing. So I try to make the 3 hours of writing hours in which I cannot clean a bathroom, for instance, something that becomes very desirable when you're procrastinating. And I like that sense of these sacred hours, when even if all I'm doing is looking at a wall, that at least I'm there, I'm sitting there, and I'm near to the manuscript.
Neither of you seem to have writer's block.
I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe in writer's block. I think the minute you start writing a sentence, whatever that sentence is, should get rid of it.
I think that, someone said that writer's block is an invention of the 1950s and alcoholic men. Because really, I don't know very many women who have trouble writing. I know women who have trouble writing while they're having children, a house, and a full-time job. But not so much, once you get a little clear of those things.
When you write, do you have a particular pen? You write with pencil? Do you use yellow paper? Do you run to your computer?
I write on my Mac Air, and I've been meaning to get a monitor because I bought the smallest screen. But no, I've worked on a computer for a very long time. And I just print out a lot. Usually if I finish with something, or finish with a section, I'll print it out, and then make hand changes, and then go back into the computer.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. It always makes me laugh because I know that Susan Mina writes with a plume. I mean, a feather plume still, but I always think of her. But no, I have a computer, and I actually just bought a new computer, a Mac, and before that I had a PC, so I'm sort of struggling with the transition, but it's a good time to struggle with the transition. But computer, yeah. And I don't like to write by hand because I have sort of strange handwriting, and I find my handwriting is distracting.
I once got really stuck on a book, and it's a book that's never been published, and I started to write it again by hand. And so I spent hours and hours writing this thing by hand, and I don't know that it improved anything. I mean, the book was the book, and the problems were the problems, the good things were the good things. But it kind of kept me busy in a way, and was interesting. I mean, it was like watching the words appear, and I don't know that that had anything to do with good writing or bad writing. It took my mind off things.
Do you read other people while you're in the middle of a novel? Do you read other writers?
I think for both Lily and me, reading is kind of like breathing, and it keeps us alive and keeps us going. And I have to also for the Pen O. Henry, but I can't suddenly decide that I can't look at a short story. Things would grind to a halt. So I read quite a lot. What I do find is that sometimes I read things that aren't so good.
Great motivator.
Yeah, and mysteries that I never guess because I'm not paying enough attention to care about what happens. It's just sometimes I feel like I'm putting something in front of me so I can think, or part of me can think.
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot. I don't think I read very many mysteries, I try and read what I want to read. I mean, I would never read Faulkner or something when I was trying to write myself, but
How do you approach the planning story?
How do we approach the planning of a story? Do you want to answer?
I think, I usually have stories usually come with either an image that's quite strong, or something I've overheard, or something that just stays in my head. And I usually, don't have too big a plan. I just am concentrating on the language that I use, and that takes me somewhere. Yeah. I mean, I have a vague idea of what the story's going to be about, but I like surprising myself. I don't want to have it all set out beforehand. Very often, I had a writing teacher, Gordon Lish, a long time ago, but who actually is not dead. There was another Gordon Lish who died. Yeah, I know, it was very odd. Gordon Dwight Lish, but he sort of encouraged us to write the opposite of what you think you're going to write, and that takes you somewhere else and surprises you. I don't always do that, but I think it's sometimes a good trick or a good thing to do.
Yeah, I would give a similar answer in that I find that my way of writing is to find the story and to kind of tease out a sequence out of a sentence or an image. And with Plum Creek, it was partly the house, which is not on Plum Creek, but I passed the actual Plum Creek 1,000 times, and there was something about the name just was so plain. And I think that I just wanted to be there somehow in this place. So it's kind of like writing down a dream or dreaming when you're writing down. But I know that there are people who that there are good writers like Stephen Dobbins, who's a wonderful novelist and poet. And I don't know if he still does this, but he used to take pictures of locations and write index cards about things. And I always thought that he was just putting off the actual horror of sitting down and writing. But he would have a shoebox full of information. And there are people who really need that before they'll go.
This is a question for Lily. The mathematical and scientific lore, learning, are so completely dissolved into the drama of the book that it feels as if nothing like actual research was even done. How do you pull off that trick?
I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, a lot of the math was cut out of the book, I have to say. No, not a lot, but a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I think in a historical novel, you have to just hide your research, and it's a sort of a balancing act between history and fiction, and you have to try and meld the two together without making a mess of either one. But I felt the math was kind of a gift in this book. It just kind of seemed to work.
But you were reading a lot of good scientific writing.
I did.
For general audience.
Yeah.
And you listened to Michael Starbird's.
Yeah, and I listened to, the great courses. I mean, I had CDs and math for non-mathematicians and probability theory. But I like being a student. I like learning stuff.
Well, and the math connects so closely to the character. I mean, I think that it never was as if, suddenly we're shifting into a math lecture. It was always connected to the life and the character and their conversation, Philip and Nina's conversation.
You did a lot of math in the book too.
In some fiction, it's as if people are given professions, and it's if they're wearing these placards.
Yeah.
It's a doctor, a lawyer, a scientist. You're asked to take it on faith. But that's not at all the case with your heroines.
Well, if she had said he was a Catholic, you know, she could have left it at that, but she steeped the book in math. I mean, it was so, there was no question of, that it had shifted into, I mean, sometimes when I read historical fiction, it's as if the narrative, you can kind of hear the narrative go click-clack, and we're getting the research. And then it goes click-clack back, and we get the story. And that certainly never happened in Lily's books.